Good evening, everyone. We are now in Daniel chapter 2, and we covered 3 verses yesterday. I just want to set the stage before we get to verse 4, because it is very important for us to bear in mind what is really happening at this time. First of all, we have King Nebuchadnezzar. Now, King Nebuchadnezzar is the king who had his dream. We have Nebuchadnezzar, who is there, had a dream, and he called his trusted, wise people. Now, the trusted, wise people consists of two groups. One would be the Chaldeans. So let me just put here the Chaldeans. The reason why I separate this group is because they are the natives of Babylon. The other group are made up of people from all over the place, different nationality. By this time, they would be able to speak the Aramaic language, but they are not native. We have people who are from other places, and they are also called magicians as well as astrologers. And we also have what we call alchemists or illusionists. Now, these are the people who are older and who are advising Nebuchadnezzar. Again, I bear in mind that there were four others, and the four others are not there. These four will be Daniel and his friends. Although they are wise, and the king had found out that they were 10 times smarter, 10 times better than the rest giving answers. But at this point in time, Nebuchadnezzar had deferred on to experience. And so we have, again, let me repeat, Nebuchadnezzar, the Chaldeans, and they would be the ones who are native to Nebuchadnezzar. And as you know, people who are of native background share a lot in common, and they're not as afraid of the king as would other people. The rest comes from different places, and then Daniel and his friends are not present. We begin in Daniel chapter 2 and in verse 4. We have this, and then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic. Now, I need to explain this before we go any further. The Chaldeans are the Chassidim, Chaldeans being native to Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. These are the ones who are now speaking to Nebuchadnezzar. These are what we call sages, wise men. And they spoke to the king, and these are natives. And they spoke in Aramaic or Aramic. Now, up to this point, these are all in Hebrew. I just want you all to be aware, once a conversation begins, right here in verse 4, it switches to Aramaic. And the discussion between the Chaldeans and Nebuchadnezzar is actually in Aramaic, their native tongue. Now, remember when we read in chapter 1, Daniel and his friends were also taught the Chaldean language, which we assume that everyone in the court of the king would have learned the Chaldean language because they would not be native. They had to learn the language. And the Chaldeans didn't, because they were already native, they were raised in this language. In Daniel chapter 1 and all the way until this point in time, everything was written in Hebrew. And so we would find a very interesting observation. When it is very important to teach sacred matters, the Jews believe that God uses the uh, Hebrew language. And so in chapter 1, you find that they all spoke in Hebrew. And because Daniel and his friends were just fresh in Babylon, they wouldn't have been able to speak any Aramaic at all. And so the conversation and the introduction in chapter 1 is largely in Hebrew. But come to chapter 2, verse 4, and we begin to read the conversation. From here onwards, all the way to the end of chapter 7, where there are conversations in Aramaic. And so the narrative that connects the conversations are also in Aramaic, all the way to the end of chapter 7. And these are the visions, conversations, the narratives, the events that actually happened in Babylon. Now, chapter 8 onwards is recorded in Hebrew. Generally believe that it might have been written after they actually went back to Jerusalem, or at the time that they have gone back to Jerusalem. But if you look at the chronology, you find that by chapter 9, they haven't gone back to Jerusalem yet. And so, one of the things that we examine the Daniel's Hebrew text, you find that chapter 8 onwards is actually recorded in Daniel's first person. He is actually writing it, addressing to the Jewish people who are concerned with the things to come. And it would have been with regards to the future of the Jewish people and the nation of Israel into the coming era, the next generations of them, and they are all recorded in Hebrew. So that's chapter 8 onwards. Chapter 7 is in Aramaic. And so we will proceed a little slower. The reason being is that I would need to try to explain to us a little bit from the Aramaic, because it's not in Hebrew. Although the words that we see uh, is actually in the Aramaic square script. So if you look at this, these are all in what we call the Aramaic square script. The printed style is derived from the post-exilic era. And so now when we talk about Aramaic, they are all looking the same, but the words are not the same. That is something which we need to bear in mind. The words are not the same, but the font, I guess you could call it the font, is unusual, right? Unusual. Now, we have here the Hebrew, and then come the Aramaic text. And interestingly, you find that in this particular version, uh, when it begins here, we have what we call the Hebrew text right here. And then after this, we have the Aramaic text. Now, I'm just showing you, don't need to know what that means. It is to say that up to this point, it is in Hebrew. And then the Aramaic begins because it's the Chaldeans who is speaking. He says, O king, live forever. Tell the dreams to your servants, and we will declare the interpretation. Important for us to realize is these are very interesting expression to wish the king well. And so he says, live forever. Now, the word here is not forever. The word here is olam. It means live for a long, long time. It's not forever. If you recall, in the Chinese expression, they would say, live for 10,000 years. And because in the Chinese language there is no such thing called forever, they just use a rather large number to express a long time. In Aramaic as well as in Hebrew, the Semitic language uses the word olam, or the concept of olam, which is the horizon. And so if you talk about the horizon, and if you are walking towards the horizon, then the question would be, how long will you get there? Very long. How far? And it's also very far. Nobody really talks about forever because they don't know. And since they don't know, they don't have any expression for it. But in the Greek language, they also use this perpetuity idea to describe forever or eternal. And it's more prominent in the Greek language than the Eastern Semitic or the Chinese language. And so it says, O king, live for a long, long time, which basically says, when you tell a king to live for a long, long time, it means that may your throne be established for a long, long time. May you be king continuously. Now, you find that they are asking the king to tell the dream to your servants. When it says your servants, we are only talking about the Chaldeans because the Chaldeans are the ones speaking. They are not expecting Nebuchadnezzar to tell the rest because they want to address the king and be smart about it. And well, I guess you can say the natives feel that they have a better affinity with the king. And so they speak that way. So if you tell us the dream, then we will actually help you and inform you on its interpretation. So this word declare is inform. But interpretation is a very interesting expression. This word interpretation really means to reveal the text or the speech so that you can actually understand. Now, that is a very important aspect. The king is troubled, and the king wants to understand. The king doesn't want to know the dream. The king wants to know what the dream means. And so, this word here, interpret, which is in our English word, uh, the Aramaic is the Peshat. It really means to reveal what is in the dream, to give the king some understanding of what it means. And so there is a premise. You must first tell the dream, and then we will tell you what it means. And that's verse 4. Verse 5. The king answered the Chaldeans. Now, this word reply also means to answer. It means to respond. Also responded and answered the Chaldeans. He says this: the command from me is firm. Now, this is important. When it says the command from me is firm, I think we need a little bit of explanation. This word in verse 5 actually means milah, and it means the speech, the matter. It's equivalent to the Hebrew Devarim. The matter, the Devar, from me is firm. Now, this word from me is firm literally means it has gone out from me. Now, what does that mean? It has gone out from me means the king is trying to say, I can't remember. It has left me. So this is not correct. So the matter or the dream has left me. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, then you will be torn limb from limb and your houses will turn into a rubbish heap. Now, this is a fairly straightforward threat. This is a threat. And understand this. Remember, I tried to level set with all of us. Nebuchadnezzar is an awful and awesome king. He is not the kind of person who would joke with people. And so when he says he wants something done, then it must be done. And the people, the Chaldeans, are trying to ask the king, you just tell us and then we'll tell you. And the king is saying, the matter, this dream has left me, gone out from me. And if you do not make known, now this word make known literally means tell me about it, right? Help me know. Tell me about that dream. And then its explanation, its meaning, then limb to limb, you will be torn. And your houses will be a dung heap, a rubbish heap. Now, the king is quite interesting. You'll notice the king's way of explaining is this: if you don't do, you die. And verse 6 says, but if you do and you tell me my dream and you tell me its meaning, then you will receive from me gifts and a reward and great honor. Lots of gifts, lots of lavish presents, that's a reward, and great honor from me. But tell me the dream and its interpretation. I just want to pause to let us know that the king's way of handling things is quite interesting. If you do, and if you do not. Very similar to how God would have done it as well. You see, in Isaiah chapter 1, it's something that you could read, Isaiah chapter 1, and God would tell them, if you turn away from doing evil, if you cease to do evil, and you do learn to do what is good, then you will get to eat the best of the land. But if you don't, then you will die by the sword. You see, the king and those in authority in those days, as well as how God describes, it is very different from our modern day of giving options. Normally, we say, well, if you do, you get to eat. If you don't get to eat. But when it comes to an absolute power like the king, like in Nebuchadnezzar, see, if you do, life will be great. If you don't, you die. And that was what God told the Israelites in Isaiah chapter 1 through Isaiah, that if they do well and turn from the evil, stop doing it, and learn to do good, they will eat of the best of the land. But if they don't, they will die by the sword. So you notice it is not a modern day option contrast. If you do, you get something nice. If you don't get something nice. It doesn't work that way. And so the king does the same here. Verse 7. Now, in verse 7, we begin to see that these will be the Chaldeans, they responded and said the same thing again. Now, this word here, the a second time also means again, right? It is a that is what it means again. The Chaldeans are the ones engaging with the king and said to the king, let the king tell the dream to his servants. Again, these are the Chaldeans. And we will inform you of its meaning. This is an insistent, and also because they realize that there is no way for any of these people, the sages, to tell the king his dream and then tell the king the meaning of the dream. And so the king got really upset. Now, one of the things we should realize is you don't like Nebuchadnezzar to be upset. So, verse 8, the king replied. Now, you notice from verse 4 onwards, you don't see the and then, and then, and then, because we are now looking at the Aramaic. The king says, I know for certain. This word I know for certain uh, basically means I know the truth. I know for a fact. I think all of these is good. I know for certain, for a fact. I know as a truth. As truth, you are trying to buy time. Now, this word here, buy time, basically means you're trying to delay. And it says, because you have perceived that the dream from me is firm. So I want to again remind all of us the matter or the dream from me is firm or has gone out from me. Now, the reason why I am doing this is to show you that the translation, the English translation, has in the book of Daniel a little bit more translation problems. So the king really says, I know for a fact that you are trying to buy time because you have perceived or you see. And this word you see, you can now understand that you're looking at me, that I have told you that I don't remember. Verse 9, that if you do not make the dream known to me, if you don't tell me the dream, there is only one decree for you. Now, verse 9 says, one decree. This word decree is rat or dat. Dat in this case, you find that it corresponds to the Hebrew dat, which means edict, an edict or a decree. So there is one decree, one edict for you. This is how kings would speak. The kings doesn't say, no, I have one thing to say to you. They would use these big but important words, that my decree, what I have decided that is going to happen. So you can think of it as a law, as a decree, or as an edict, as a rule that once it comes out, then no one can escape. So it says there is only one law for you, or and 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 basically the king is trying to then suggest you have agreed together to speak something that is deceitful, uh, and something that will corrupt, or words that will lie and corrupt before me until uh, the situation is changed. Now, this what the situation is changed means the literal sense is until the time is changed. All right. So deceit and something that spoils. And so the king is saying, you're trying to delay time, buy time, you're trying to wait until the things will be different. So a lot of the NASB translation is really an interpretation. The literal word here is time, that the time is different, right? The time is different. And the king is very, very anxious. And so for the king to be anxious, he really wants to know. So therefore, tell me the dream. Tell me what I have dreamt so that I may know that you can tell me its meaning. This is what the king is really asking for. So we read in the first few verses, when the king was troubled, I had mentioned to you that the king is a very smart and intelligent king. For the most part, when somebody dreams, nobody really cares what the dream is because you can't really remember. And even though it might be a scary dream for whatever that's worth, you know that it's just a dream. But in this particular case, Nebuchadnezzar had many small dreams, and then he awoken up because he was really troubled. And he needed to know the meaning because he felt very strongly that there is a meaning. It is not just a random dream. We go to verse 10. The Chaldeans replied the king, or responded to the king, responded to the front of the king. So they are standing before the king, and all this is in Aramaic. And then they said, there is no person on earth who could tell you the matter. This is uh, the idea here. Who can tell you the king's word, for example, the king's matter, which is the dream, to the king. Because no great king or ruler has ever asked anything like this of his magician, sorcerer, astrologers, or Chaldeans right here. And so the Chaldeans understand one thing. The idea of a dream resides not with people on earth, not human beings, basically. Uh, and so then we come to verse 11. Now, in verse 11, it says this: moreover, the thing which the king demands, or the king is asking, is difficult. Now, the idea of rare gives us the idea of being very heavy, very hard to carry, very unusual. That is the meaning of difficult. And they go on to say there is no one else who could tell to the king except. Now, the idea of except means besides humans. Now, we say no one else is no humans can do that. But God. Now, this word here, God, is the word Elohim or Elah in the Elah in the plural. And that would be the same as Elohim. And so the idea of gods in this case is not gods, this would be angels. And so the angels who dwell not with human beings, perhaps they can tell. and they don't live with flesh and blood. And that's one of the things that the sages, who are these people, would think of a different realm. So they have this spiritual realm, a spirit level realm that describes angels or powerful spirit beings. Also using the word Elah or Elohim. And then the sages believe that human beings cannot tell a dream because it's in somebody's mind. And only it occurs in the higher level. In the higher level where it is beyond human, then perhaps that would work. Now, that would be the idea that the Chaldeans are saying. Now, what is the Chaldeans not saying? The Chaldeans are not saying that they can't tell the king. The Chaldeans put it in a way that they frame it to avoid the disappointment of the king and places the blame on something else. Because humanly speaking, the sages, the Chaldeans, the magicians, the astrologers, they all can't tell dreams. That's the common understanding. And they feel that anyone who can tell dreams are those who are not living among flesh and blood. They are of a higher realm. They are of the angelic realm. They are in the God realm. And that would be consistent with how the rest of the narrative would proceed. Verse 12. Verse 12 says, because of this, or in view of this, the king became very angry and extremely furious. Now, these two words are synonyms, I guess you can say that. There are two different words, but they two mean very much the same. Uh, they got very angry, and in English, angry and furious are similar words. So the king became very angry, extremely furious, and then this would be an and then. Once he got very angry, he gave orders to kill all the wise men of Babylon. Now, this is where the trouble begins. And by giving order, uh, we could say that these are words that he uttered. Now, one of the things that you find is that the normal words used on the normal citizens, compared to the same words used on the king, well, in the translation or in the meaning, you find that the king, when he says something, it comes out as an order. When man says something, it comes out as an intent. And so in verse 13, it says this, and so the law was issued that the wise men be killed. And they looked for Daniel and his friends to kill them. Now, this word here as friends, I think we could actually express this. They were looking for Daniel and associates. They are the comrades. They are their friends, right? So it is in that mode that Daniel is also part of that decree to kill. Remember, though they were not part and parcel of that conversation, they are also part and parcel of the wise men. Notice? And these are the sages. Sages are wise men. Why do you call them wise men? Because they have ways of finding answers for what the king may ask. In this case, the king asked, and nobody could answer. At least nobody there present. And what is important now is that from verse 13, we know that Daniel and his friends weren't there. And then from verse 14 onwards, Daniel will begin a conversation that will change the tide. And so, with this, we will continue next week